What?
Here's Brunette. Brunette's in. Andrew Brunette shot, score! Andrew Brunette in sudden death overtime, and Minnesota is moving on.
I won't need my high school diploma anymore. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
Played here by Danny Heatley, and out they come 2-on-1. This is Niederreiter holding onto it, and he scores! Nino Niederreiter wins the series for the Minnesota Wild.
And welcome to the Giles and the Goalies podcast. I'm Charlie. We got Giles with us. We got Ben with us. We have gone back to our original intro, mainly so that Ben isn't murdered in the streets.
I don't think the intro pissed people off so much as my outro music pissed people off.
Well, yeah, your outro music pissed me off. If you didn't join us last week, Ben trolled us all pretty good with a little REM sad music with Patrick Kane highlights at the beginning and Chelsea Dagger at the end. So if you're listening to the podcast for the first time, just be ready. If you listen again, something like that could happen again.
Well, which is extra bad because I control the buttons, so I can edit highlights that I want to, and you guys have to listen to it. But the funny thing is, the guys recording, they can't hear it, so they just trust me.
I do notice you've been hitting buttons over there for the last minute or two.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, crap.
Oh, man.
Oh my God!
Okay, well, this might be the most button-happy podcast we've had.
God, you're more button happy than the local radio station.
Well, let's not get into that.
It's good because I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Well, I think he's talking about the K shall not be mentioned.
Rhymes with hand.
Yes. Yeah. I don't have any of their crappy generic drops loaded into my phone. So
We're here all week.
At that.
Anyway, Twitter handles at Ben Remington,
Word.
at Giles Farrell, at The Unplayable for me. So let's get into it. Let's get into the main topic that has depressed all of it. We've had no wild games to speak of this week, of course, but there's still things to depress you, and it's the fact that we all found out, or kind of concluded, that Jared Spurgeon is probably going to get traded this summer or next summer or somewhere in between.
Yeah, probably, maybe, definitely. It's tough to say. I wrote an article about it on Friday, just kind of outlining the reasons why I thought, and why the writing was on the wall. It's something that Michael Russo tweeted specifically in response to Tony from Hockey Wilderness's question about it. And then you've got further evidence of Chuck Fletcher in the year-end press conference talking glowingly about the development of all of his defensemen, except Jared Spurgeon. So, that along with just taking a quick glance at the defenseman section of their general manager salary cap page, and it's, I don't want to say it's a foregone conclusion, but I would honestly be a little surprised if it didn't happen, I guess, in the next calendar year and change, I suppose.
Yeah. And obviously, from a fan standpoint, this is horrible. We all love Spurgeon.
Right.
And we all think he brings so much to the team, and there are a lot of people who can show you the numbers to back that up.
Right.
And but from a business perspective, you have to. I mean, that's the worst part, is that you have to.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I don't know. I mean, his salary cap hit isn't obscene. It's, I think, $2.6 million this season.
It's not about what his cap hit is now.
Right.
It's what his cap hit is going to be in
exactly.
2016-17.
And he hasn't been extended yet, is the thing. He's only under contract for one more season, whereas most of the rest of the D-Corps, with the exception of Dumba, is signed through at least 4 years. And then Dumba needs to be signed. And obviously they're going to take priority with that. That's going to be something that they absolutely have to get done come hell or high water. So that's more money out the window that's not going to go to Jared Spurgeon.
Yeah, that's a few years down the road, though.
Well, he's only got a year left on his current deal. That's according to general manager. He's an RFA after next year. I don't know how that works, but that's what they showed on general manager.
Maybe it is the same. I guess maybe he has played a handful of games in multiple seasons.
They did burn his a year off his entry-level deal last year before they sent him back to Portland or
either way,
junior
it's a higher
or whatever.
ceiling there.
Right.
Yeah. You get with Spurgeon.
Right, and so if essentially they're picking Dumbo over Spurgeon, you can't really blame them.
No.
But it's still, it sucks. I mean, you want to see Spurgeon around. He's carved out a nice role for himself on this team in the top four, and it's unfortunate that it has to work this way, but that's just kind of what we deal with in the salary cap era.
Well, it's funny because the same reasons that we all want to see him stay are the exact same reasons why it's such great business for him to go, from a purely dollars and cents standpoint. Right. When you think about where he came from, he was drafted by the Islanders, who didn't want him.
Right.
Back in the era when the Islanders only made just glowing personnel decisions. And the Wild got him for nothing. And when they got him, nobody heard about him. It was
nobody knew who he was.
Fourth-round pick that nobody wanted. And halfway through the year, he was kind of a fixture on a bad team. And he just kind of kept growing and growing and growing into the player. I remember actually...
Not literally, but...
Talked to Spurgeon. Well, yeah. Talked to Spurgeon about this. It was his first year. I happened to be there writing an article on the team. I was at their kind of holiday practice where they all bring their kids and stuff like that. And then there's Jared Spurgeon sort of sitting in the corner. I got a chance to ask him, what are you going to do for Christmas now? I mean, I'm guessing this isn't what you were thinking. And he's like, yeah, well, it's easier to get home to Edmonton from here than it is from Houston, because that's where he was at the time. And he's like, and I don't even know if he was going home, but he told me, he's really happy about it. And even at the time, I was just like, this is great, I'm happy for this guy. Yeah. He seems like a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be here in 2 months. And I was completely wrong, of course. And, he's kind of continued to grow and surprise us all as a player for years. But that's why it's such great business, because, you got him for nothing, and you might trade him for a very valuable player or two. You never know. So it's a hard emotional one to take, but it makes sense, which is still doesn't make me feel any better.
Yeah, it still hurts.
The thing with him is, at least going back to his salary, is if Jonas Brodin is going to make $4.1 million cap hit for the next 6 years, what is Jared Spurgeon going to make?
Right.
$5 million? $5.5 million?
Right.
I wonder if he wouldn't make as much, only because Brodin comes with that former first-round pick bump.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. Once you get past your first contract, you should be judged on how you've played, not where you were drafted anymore. But, first-round picks get better money and they get more chances. It's like going into the NHL with a PhD,
And the fact that Brodin's over 6 feet tall. I mean, that can't be ignored. And I think that, despite all the compliments that you can heap at Spurgeon, and there is a lot of them, he's always going to be knocked because he's 5'9". That's always going to follow him. That's always going to be mentioned about him. It's a size game in some instances, and a lot of people like to downplay size, but it still can be an important piece of the puzzle, an important notch on a player's belt, especially when considering contracts and trades and playing time even, So we saw a lot of teams try to run him at times, given his size, and the West is certainly there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to do that in the West. So that's, I think, maybe not the reason, but a reason why Chuck Fletcher is not, as high on Spurgeon as perhaps the fans are.
And we talked about this before the podcast. He's the most replaceable player on the roster. Not to sound harsh, but
what I meant was the most replaceable of the three guys that we thought might be traded. The other two being Charlie Coyle and Michael Granlund.
And it just makes sense to do that because you theoretically have other defensemen in line who can or have shown that they can step up and into those roles. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he seems, and I'm sure when we said he's the most replaceable of those three, a lot of people probably just punched their computers or wherever they're listening to this. So let me explain.
Punch the air.
I don't think he is the worst of those three players. He's the most accomplished in the NHL of those three players.
Arguably the best right now.
But he's not a center. Like you said, he's a smaller defenseman.
Yep.
And his ready-made replacement is already there, and it's somebody we can see.
Yep.
Now, the
There's a
player
couple of
you
them.
get for Spurgeon might be a replacement for Granlund or Coyle.
Yeah.
You know, depending on who it is. And we've heard some forward names bandied about. Everybody, you know, read that Jim Matheson thing about Nail Yakupov and proceeded to, you know, handle it very well, calmly,
Yeah.
like we always do.
Calm.
But yeah, it's one of those things where it's, you know, if you've got somebody to fill in that spot, like you've got Dumba, who needs more ice time.
Yeah.
That ice time's got to come from somewhere, and it's probably not going to come from Ryan Suter. So there you go. So that's why I say he's the most replaceable, based on what we can see.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he's not an awesome player.
Right. Well, and the fact they have Foley and the fact they have Olofsson. I mean, those two alone. I mean, and they also have other defensive prospects. You know, and that's
If you want a short, speedy defenseman, just pull Louis Belpedio out of college.
well. That I mean, there's
Don't do that. But I'm
that's
just
right.
I don't.
And that's I mean, maybe they even draft a defenseman this year if they're going best player available. That's something that happens. I hate to bring it up, but Mike Riley is out there as a college free agent right now. I mean, there's a lot of options, and they're already deep, is what I'm saying. They're already deep, and they could potentially get deeper. So Spurgeon being shipped off as a fairly valuable asset probably is the right thing to do, unfortunately.
And I think what a lot of people do in these situations is they look at, Jared Spurgeon's going to leave. They don't think about what you're going to get for him,
Right.
which hopefully is something good. And
Yeah.
they also, you don't make a trade with the idea that, we're just not going to do anything to fill that spot.
Yeah.
You can go out and get a third pair defenseman, move Dumbo up to the second pair, or whatever you want to do if you want to play Dumbo with Suter,
Right.
Brodeen with Scandella,
Which I like. I would like that better.
But and then you get a third pair defenseman who is out there on the market. There are a lot of kind of third pair kind of guys that aren't that are going to be free agents this year. There always are. That's you can find scrappy third pair defensemen who end up being pretty good players.
I didn't mind what Leopold did for them down the stretch this year. I thought he played all right. I mean, if he's only going to play 10 minutes a game, I mean, he played solid enough to do that. And he obviously would love nothing more than to resign here. He basically said as much when he got dealt here. And so if you're looking at an extremely team-friendly contract, I don't mind bringing him back at all.
I think you can do both.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on what you want to do with Foley, which I think you got to give him a shot next year.
Yeah, he played enough games this year.
Olofsson is going to go to Iowa because he played.
He missed
Well,
all
he missed
the
the whole
year.
season,
Yeah.
But you could find somebody to play with Bolin on the third pair. That's the third pair.
Yeah.
But keep Leopold as the seventh guy.
Yep.
Which is what he was supposed to be anyway.
Right.
So I mean, there are things that can be done if and when this Spurgeon thing happens, and then you got yourself another offensive asset.
Yep.
Which, you know, if you're going to lose some guys up front, like Stewart, like
Yeah, I don't think they're re-signing Bergenheim. I don't think they're re-signing Brodziak necessarily, and I kind of doubt to this point they're re-signing Stewart. And after the regular season, everyone thought it was kind of a done deal. They'd do everything to bring him back, but you know, after the playoffs, I'm not so sure.
I'll see that. It's kind of one of those I'll see it to believe it
Right.
kind of things because Chuck Fletcher's been very high on Chris Stewart.
That's true. It's a good point.
So
It's a good point.
I'll just kind of take the wait and see approach with Chris Stewart.
I've been secretly thinking it's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
Only because everybody around us doesn't want it to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Everyone doesn't want it to happen, so it'll happen. That's how things work in this town.
Sports.
Yeah.
He's a guy that he did some nice things during the regular season. He didn't do them often enough to justify being a second line forward. But he wasn't a waste.
No.
But he has been talked about like he always was a complete waste because he didn't play all that well against Chicago. Well, nobody played well.
Nobody.
No,
So-
everyone would play horribly against
I
Chicago.
guess maybe to give him some credit, he did all right on the line with Mikko Koivu, something that's easier said than done.
True.
Finding a winger who can stay on the line with the captain.
Until our September podcast, where we basically spent 3 weeks trying to figure out what the lines should be once we know who's there. But it's going to be an interesting kind of speculation month. So that's the Spurgeon thing. Giles also wrote on Friday and wrote a really, I think, an interesting article, which was, ways that Mike Yeo, it was Mike Yeo.
Yeah, it was basically
the team without making changes.
Yeah.
Essentially. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at, because let's say Spurgeon doesn't get traded this year, or he does get traded and his replacement comes in and is basically going to fill in space left by a Stewart or a Brodziak or whatever it's going to be. The roster might not look drastically different from an overall talent standpoint, so this team just has to find a way to play better. And I think Giles had the thoughts on that. So, take the process of the article.
Well, yeah, I had 5 suggestions for Mike Gill for next season, assuming they do go in with essentially the same roster. Number 1 was the easiest thing to write was, please, God, change the power play. Stop sending out the high-paid veterans just because they're the highest-paid veterans. And whether it's just switching the lines or switching your power play coach, please, God, change up something.
Yeah, and even the players expressed a fair amount of frustration with this at the end of the season press conference, which was a little surprising. I mean, you had Thomas Vanek basically say, well, yeah, we've got 2 good units. The first unit is guys that are, maybe the best players on the team, but the second unit is hotter, and we should have rolled with the hotter unit. I mean, that's, coming out of Vanek, who was on said cold first line, that's pretty monumental for a player to say that. And maybe, some people thought that he was speaking out of turn with that, but it's like, it's realistic, really.
And when he said that, Ryan Suter instantly backed him up. Ryan Suter, who doesn't say anything to begin with, backed him up.
Also on the first unit.
Yeah.
He leads by example, Giles.
He's not even the captain.
But
I think there's a good point there. And I think that they can learn from the success of essentially the second unit, because the second unit, I think, was good because you have Dumba's shot at the top, which, that's not going to score a ton of goals by itself, but just the fact that you have a guy with a cannon like that, if you insist upon running that freaking 1-3-1 system that I dislike so much, you have to have a guy with a heavy shot at the top. And Jason Pominville and Ryan Suter are fantastic hockey players, but when you think of both of them, you don't necessarily think
they don't
howitzer.
Have great shots.
That's just not necessarily one of their strengths. And also, I mean, there's a lot of other issues to it too, like Nino and Coyle being on that second line. That's a fair amount of size up front. Not to say that Parisi shouldn't be on the first line, but Koivu being on the first line, he's definitely not the most offensive player that we have. And same thing with Suter. So you're rolling with 2 of your defensive specialists on the first power play unit all season long. And I think that fans and even the players have a right to be frustrated with that.
I think what you have is a really big opportunity, not just in the power play, but for every line you've got.
Yeah.
After what happened in that Chicago series, for a grand reassessment of who should be playing and when on this team. And that's how they're going to improve, is just start giving out the minutes. And I know this is not new, and a lot of people have said this, but they were saying it to a team that was rolling through the second half of the season.
The best team in the NHL, yeah.
Now they're not.
3 months.
Yeah. You can take a look at the team and say, we need to find a way to get Nino Niederreiter more involved, or Jason Zucker more involved. Guys that are clearly offering a little bit of a skill that the veteran guys don't necessarily have. Yeah. Zucker's got the speed. Niederreiter has great hands around the net. Yeah. Dumba's got the shot. You can do things like that now.
And I'm hoping that the team actually takes that opportunity. Otherwise, it could end up just being another season like what we just had.
Yeah. Really good during the regular year, and then goes belly up in the playoffs.
I guess I would hope for a more consistent regular season if we were to say belly up in the playoffs.
Yeah,
but,
I definitely.
one that gives me less gray hair.
Yeah, with Dubnyk returning, and one thing that I was encouraged by with that press conference, just to hit on that briefly, was that from what the interview with Dubnyk sounded like, it would take a grand F up for him not to re-sign here. Is kind of how he made it sound. I mean, he basically said as much as like, well, it's not it's not my job, but basically he said it would have to. I think that the Wild would have to really spit in the face of Dubnyk and his agent to not re-sign him at this point.
Or you can hire Adrian Peterson's agent. And that'll take care of itself.
Oh, Christ.
I'm just thinking, though, like all the teams, I'm trying to think of teams that could use a goalie. I mean, obviously, you got teams like Edmonton, but he's not going back there.
No.
Maybe a team, I guess the Blues might throw a ton of money at him.
Because they're the Blues.
Maybe a team like Dallas, but I just don't see a lot of logical destinations for him. And he was very happy here. That was no secret. He said he was a happy guy here.
Yep. Yeah. So that's reassuring, but off topic a little bit, I suppose.
Suggestion number 2 was it's time to consider Ryan Suter and Jonas Brodin as a second defensive pairing. It was kind of more on they don't generate a whole lot of offense, so if you're down a goal late in the third period and you have them on the ice like we've seen them, you're not exactly inspiring a lot of confidence in me that you're going to get said goal with them on the ice because they're better. I just don't.
What are they
they're not good.
For about 4 goals between the two of them?
I think so. Suter somehow had 3 goals. I couldn't believe he had 3 goals. Yeah. Like, first of all, he got 3 shots through to the net. I mean, it was. We kind of hit on it earlier, suggesting that maybe they just split up the defensive pairings and.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, how many goals with the goalie pulled in the final minute and a half of a game look pretty?
No,
it always comes from either bombing away from the point with 8 guys in front of the net, or you get it into those 8 guys and somebody smacks it in. That's how it is. So you want the guys that can really bomb away, which is Dumba and Scandella.
Yep.
And, honestly, even Folan, who actually has a pretty heavy shot that we never got to see, might be a better option.
Guy, but better shot.
Yeah.
I agree with that one.
Yeah, and cutting down, kind of side in there, cutting down Suter's minutes.
Well,
kind of another ulterior motive, which...
if he's a top 4 defenseman, I think they're going to get the same minutes anyway, but it's the fact that he was on the first unit power play.
That just drove up all his minutes.
Because otherwise him and Brodin would have the same minutes. And I'm perfectly fine with Ryan Suter being out there penalty killing. He should be, ideally.
Yeah.
But being the point man on the power play, along with Pomino, it made no sense at all.
Frequently Suter was not just the point man on the first unit; he was the point man on the second unit.
Right.
He was the only guy that would stay out there.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
That really jacks up your minutes.
And it just, I don't know. When you have a guy signed for 10 more years, you might want to start thinking of cutting his minutes slightly, just so you can get more long term. Just a suggestion. Another suggestion for another suggestion post. Number 3 was, let's commit to one position for Charlie Coyle, because I am tired of watching him get flip-flop from wing to center and center to wing.
I can't imagine it's very easy for him either. Not to say that it's super hard. I think it's probably easier to do that than to do the Dustin Byfuglien dance. But... it's
the old Brent Burns move.
Yeah, the Brent Burns / Dustin Byfuglien dance. I think that if he could focus on one or the other, he'd probably be a little more successful at it. That, and not to mention line continuity. We had a lot of different line combinations until I think the last 6 weeks to 2 months of the season is where our lines really clicked in together and stayed together for that period of time and into the playoffs. Otherwise, before that, the lines were, it was a nightly thing almost. It seemed like at some point with some lines.
It was period by period sometimes.
Right. The first line stayed pretty consistent all season long, minus injuries, brief injuries to Parise and Granlund. But other than that, lines 2 through 4 were an absolute, kaleidoscope for most of the season.
Kaleidoscope. I like
I was about to say, good kaleidoscope reference.
When's the last time you looked into a kaleidoscope?
Oh, man.
Totally off topic. I'm not
Yeah,
challenging you
I
at
mean,
all.
probably more recent than I would like to admit, but I don't remember exactly.
I'm
It was a
gonna.
couple hours ago. Wasn't it?
I don't know. I don't even know. I would like to say like when I was 5 or 6, but I know it was somewhere in between there. I probably picked one up and been like, oh, hey, I remember these things.
Until you mentioned it, I hadn't thought about a kaleidoscope. Several
It
years.
just popped into my mind. It's weird like that. I don't know. My mind is a very interesting.
Is your mind a kaleidoscope?
It is. That's actually kind of accurate because that's unfortunately how
confusing.
things work for me. It's very creative and constantly changing and not all that easy to understand, and you don't get what's happening or why it's there or what the attraction is.
All right, let's
I'll stop
get
now.
back on the kaleidoscope.
Episode 13, the kaleidoscope.
Well, we're way past episode 13 at this point.
Yeah. Well, episode 13 that people actually heard.
That's true.
All right, fair enough.
I guess last.
Well, no, but going back to that, though, the Charlie Coyle thing, where would you guys rather see him play? Would you rather see him play center or wing?
That's tough because I think he might be more suited as a wing, but I think you actually saw a little bit more success out of him as a center this year. And that might have just been, like I said, with that last 6 weeks to 2 months or whatever, when they actually got lines to click, he was a center, and it worked. But, just given his game, he might be better off as a wing. I mean, he's not the fastest guy on the ice, and he's got decent size. So I don't know. It's tough to say, but yeah, either way, I guess as long as they pick one.
He did just have a good World Championship tournament as a wing.
Right.
But I don't know. This is one of the more intriguing questions that the Wild have to answer this summer: is do they see Coyle as a center? Because he did not have a good face-off percentage by any means this year, so that would have to improve. And then this is also something that theoretically could be tied to a trade involving a defenseman we might have just discussed, where, say, they do pick up a center, then that probably does shove Coyle back to the wing. But I don't know. When he first called him up, he started as a wing, I believe, on the Parise-Koivu Coyle line.
Huh.
So I guess I would probably rather see him as a wing at this point, but I wouldn't be disappointed if they tried him out at center again.
If he was more willing to use his size, he'd be so much more successful as a wing. I mean, but he doesn't. I mean, he's 6'3", 215, I believe, but he doesn't play like it. If he was willing to do the Mark Parrish, Andrew Brunette dirty work in front of the net, I think he could be a great wing with the size that he naturally has. And he's got the hands to play
you for invoking Mark Parrish. Spent a lot of time trying to block that name out.
It wasn't that bad. Come on.
Good thing you don't listen to a radio station.
They were still paying him last year.
Well, yeah, that part is bad.
It was only last year we stopped paying him?
It ended last summer, it was the last year that Mark Parrish got a paycheck from the Minnesota Wild.
Oh, boy.
Must be terrible.
Yeah.
Near seven-figure buyout salary.
Yeah.
What a life. That's Ilya Bryzgalov for the next 15 years.
Thanks, Doug.
Anyway, number 4 on this list was kind of what we already previously discussed, was get the younger guys more ice time. Take some heat off the veterans, because the veterans are taking a lot of heat at the moment for their lack of success in the playoffs. I talked about it last week with my Jason Zucker and Nino Niederreiter article, and how they could be an answer to the goal scoring problem, and the defensemen. Just give the young guys a shot, please.
I just think there's a level of electricity in a couple of these younger players that the older players don't have, that we don't get to see.
Yeah.
I mean, you see Niederreiter score some pretty incredible goals.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've seen what Zucker is capable of when he gets to kind of open up and drive the net. And, I just want to have them get those opportunities a little more and see what that does in terms of upping the dynamic of the Wild. Because I think they are a little bit of a stale group at this point. You know, even if you have to try out line combinations that we have never seen before, I think it might be worth a shot.
I mean, if you do that, you have to make some tough decisions. I mean, Mike Yeo has typically not gone against his veterans, but eventually, if you do this, you have to put one of these guys, like a Pominville or maybe even a Koivu at some point on the third line.
Right.
And it just...
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to think about it in terms of a third line.
Well, right.
It's true.
When
The way the Wild are trying to build themselves is they're trying to have 3 scoring lines and then that one grinder unit at the end.
Yeah.
So don't look at these as a demotion. Just spread the time out more evenly, and then you can ride a hot hand every night, and that's a team people are going to play more. It doesn't have to be the same people that win you the game every night. In fact, you're a better team if it isn't the same people that win you the game every night.
And we even saw when this team was hot down the stretch, there was a couple of games where the fourth line was huge. Came up huge, you know, when Fontaine was spending a lot of time in the fourth line, and you know, Brodziak had a couple of good games and stuff like that. So there was times where, you know, the fourth line was the line winning the game for the team, and the rest of it was just kind of a push.
I was a huge Justin Fontaine critic before last season. I just was at a point where I was like, no way he makes this team. I just don't see it yet. And he did. And in the postseason, I realized when he was gone, I was like, he is really good at what he does. And I miss it. And
you're probably going to see a lot more of him next year.
I hope so.
This is a guy that, you know, if some of these players leave, he's going to go back to being a fixture.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing because he's clearly getting better as a player. And, I mean, he is kind of in his prime. He's not a younger guy.
No.
He's got to be 27, 28 now. So, you know, get the good years out of him while you can. There's only going to be a couple of them. He's not a big guy.
Right.
But he has skills.
If anything, he's also in line to replace Kyle Brodziak for most awesome-looking playoff beard.
Yes.
He had a pretty grizzly beard going last year.
Beard potential is pretty weak.
Yeah.
I mean, you had...
Well, it's a lot of Scandinavians, and it's few and far between.
Yeah.
You know, once in a while, you'll get the Viking that can just absolutely grow an absolute face pain.
Henry Zetterberg.
Right. But for the most part, you know, they have a lot of trouble getting a big, thick, blonde beard going. So
I guess when you have a lot of 22-year-olds also.
That too.
Just trying to think about
Zach
me.
Breezy's beard game is pretty good.
Me trying to grow a beard at 22 is pretty sad.
Yeah, maybe Parise should not go with that next year.
I didn't think it was that
No,
bad.
it was fine.
But it just wasn't strong.
I would have liked to have seen what it looked like in June. It would have been horrible, but
it
awesome.
wasn't Sidney Crosby bad.
Oh, God.
It wasn't Scott Hartnell good. So
it also wasn't the beard, and maybe we can segue this into our next topic because we are going to talk about playoffs. The teams that are still playing.
Sure.
Is Chris Kreider and his Sheriff of Nottingham goatee. What is the deal with that? I mean, that has not been a good look since 1992.
Yeah.
And he's clearly manicuring the hell out of that thing because it looks perfect. I mean, nobody likes Chris Kreider to begin with, and then he's got to go and roll that look.
I was going to say, this is Chris Kreider, and he probably doesn't give.
So is he cultivating an image there?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks like a movie villain.
Like Snidely
You know
Whiplash.
what it looks like? I mean, you have to take the hair away because it has different hair, but it's a Hans Gruber. He's got a Hans Gruber goatee. I went Die Hard on you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
I don't
right.
know what that reference was. Sorry.
For now on, for the rest of the playoffs, I'm referring to Kreider as the Gruber.
I'm going to go home and Photoshop Chris Kreider's face onto Hans Gruber.
I wish I could tell you guys that I've spent more time thinking about this than just the last 45 seconds, but I really haven't. This is just a series of epiphanies that you got to witness live on a podcast.
God.
Or semi-live if you're listening to this.
Right.
That's such a good...
A month from now for some reason.
Good comparison.
Yeah, I was thinking a day from now, but maybe you're backed up and you want to catch up.
You would like to binge on podcasts. It's. I unfortunately didn't get to see any of the games this past weekend. for whatever reason. But
Well, I got a shocker for you. The Rangers won 2-1
that's been a theme I've heard.
for the seventh time in the playoffs. Literally the seventh time in the playoffs.
Yeah, I did see the highlights of that this morning where Lundqvist, only had to make 24 saves, but
A lot of them were really nice.
Yeah.
it was a tough 24 saves, perhaps. So that I don't know. I'm really looking forward to both these series because I think, as always with the conference finals, you always have a really good potential to have an outstanding series. Not even necessarily a 7-game series, but that always helps. But potential just to have a really good, closely fought series, which we definitely got on Saturday. Maybe not so much today, but
Well, today's game was interesting because it was a blowout that wasn't actually a blowout.
Right.
I mean, Frederik Andersen was great. And basically, the Blackhawks just didn't do all the things they did to the Wild. They had great chances. I mean, Patrick Kane had a chance in the first period where he got a chance to walk around the goaltender.
Yeah,
and Frederik Andersen dives and gets the paddle of his stick on a shot. I mean, against the Wild, Kane doesn't even need to do that. He just farts and the puck goes in. And this is how it was just the puck luck was going the other way. And we sort of talked about this before the podcast, but the Blackhawks have a third defense pair problem now because they won't play Kimmo Timonen. David Rundblad is not good, and he was responsible for 2 goals today, the first 2 goals. And now, they're down in the series and missing Michael Roosevelt of all people. And Nick Leddy. They talked about that today. Mike Milbury talked about it at length, of course.
Mike.
Right. No, he said that. He said, Leddy's cap hit this year is only like $2 million something, and it's like, yeah, but what was it going to be next year, Mike?
Right.
They're in the exact same spot that we are with Spurgeon right now.
You guys can't tell, but right now I'm just playing the REM Everybody Hurts in my head. The Blackhawks can only...
farting, so I just made it work.
It goes hand in hand.
Only can the Blackhawks just look so good against the Wild in one round, and then they just, all of a sudden, they just have an enormous amount of problems in the next round.
Well, I mean, like I said, it was only one game, and I think for long stretches they did outplay Anaheim today. But it'll be interesting to see how people who kind of flew off the handle after the Chicago series, if Anaheim does beat Chicago, how their opinion of the series might change in terms of moving back to the fact that the Chicago series was probably, I don't want to say entirely fluky, but there was some fluky aspects to it.
Sure.
That drove the action the way they did. Now, obviously, the Blackhawks might win the next 4 games.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought they would win this series because I don't think Anaheim had to play anybody in the first 2 rounds.
No, I think you're right. But it is going to be tough for them. I mean, when you're looking at, Keith Seabrook and Hjalmarsson and Oduya playing, 27 minutes a game between all 4 of them. That's
2 rounds. If you want to win the Stanley Cup.
Exactly. That's a tough road to win the cup. I mean, that you can do it. I think it can be done, and if you're going to do it, those 4 guys might be the best 4 in the league equipped to do it. But that does not make it easier to do. I mean, you still need a third line every now and then, and if they've got a third line that's basically unplayable at the NHL level, it's going to be tough.
Thank you for invoking my Twitter handle, by the way.
That was it's marketing.
Solid marketing job.
That's what I do.
And that kind of shows you what the Blackhawks, I think, are about to become. They're going to be a team that has to start scrapping it together because their cap situation is only going to get worse.
Yeah, they're pretty much almost guaranteed not to re-sign Oduya.
Yeah.
And, there could be some other... Seabrook is also going to be a very likely casualty because he's only got 1 year left on his deal. And they're up against some pretty brutal cap situations thanks to their
this is why
days that they gave Taves and Kane.
This is why we're seeing the run on all these college free agent signings that the Blackhawks have been doing, just so they can have these players who they can just go, well, we're just going to roll the dice on all of you and hope that a couple of you kind of pan out so we can have you on cheap deals for the next couple of years.
And that's how they're going to have to do it. And, they've had pretty good personnel so far, personnel decisions so far during this run. So they might be able to keep doing it, but that's going to get really interesting in the next couple of years. And I don't want to say it'll triple it because the 2 players they're paying a ton of money are totally worth it.
Right.
But
Maybe not that much money, but
yeah.
and you can see a situation like with Pittsburgh where they're paying a lot of money to a couple of players,
And they're having trouble putting anybody else on the
exactly.
team.
And as Giles, painstakingly pointed out earlier this season, the rest of their lineup outside of their top stars was atrocious, and that was a big reason why they limped into the playoffs and were subsequently Old Yellered by the New York Rangers.
Yellered.
When you're putting
Everybody.
I should have queued up that song.
when you're putting the hopes of your season on Bo Bennett and Blake Como,
Right.
and
Well, it's just one of those things where
just-
it's like, if you're going to play like that, you better hope nobody ever gets hurt ever.
Right.
Like
And-
Pittsburgh had, Letang got hurt and Dupuis got hurt and may never play again.
right, and- and even Dupuis, had he been able to play it, he would not have saved
No,
that.
'cause, he's not that good.
And he's not getting better. Age is
younger, right?
age is a big factor here, and Chris Letang is an interesting
Yeah,
deal here because that last hit he took that
Ugh,
he didn't come back
scary.
from,
It
that's
was ugly. It was really bad.
And
yikes.
he's had so many problems over
Right.
the last couple of years. I mean, he's a really good player, but eventually he's not a big guy. I mean,
No.
I don't know if he's going to be able to hold up. And they're probably going to lose Paul Martin this summer.
Yep.
It's he's not coming here, people.
No.
It's not happening.
Nope.
One of us. One of
Yeah,
us.
well, he doesn't
One
want to
of
come
us.
home. So,
One of us.
so yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Chicago. But for now, they're still in it, and I think they could have won that game today, even though they ended up losing 4-1. For long stretches of the game, they were the better team. In the first period, Anaheim was having trouble getting out of their own zone without turning the puck over, and just barely survived. So, thanks to Anderson.
Yep.
My interest level in this series is nothing. I have none. The only way I will watch a game in this series at this point is if the NBC or NHL and NBC tweet from yesterday does come true and they put on the uniforms from the first Mighty Ducks movie. That'll be the only way you'll grab my attention in this series. Otherwise,
I believe it.
I'll watch the Eastern Conference Finals and cheer for them in the next round.
Can I go on a broadcasting nerd rant for like 2 minutes
Have
about
it.
this? So, obviously, when you get to the Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals, there's only 2 teams left,
Sure.
broadcasting teams left.
Yeah.
And for years on NBC, it has been Mike Emmerich and Eddie Olczyk and Peter McGuire as one.
Yep.
And the other one has been Brian Engblom and
Dave Strader.
somebody and Dave Strader. This year, it is Joe Micheletti, who I think is a very good color man.
Yes.
And Brian Engblom is the between the bench kind of guy, where he does a pretty good job. And Kenny Albert. Now,
Yes!
I know you two already know my feelings about Kenny Albert. The rest of the world, I'm going to put world in quotes here,
Wow.
is about to learn how I feel about Kenny Albert. I just think that he is awful.
Yeah.
And I don't think Strader is actually all that great. He's a very professional guy. He's not that exciting. But they have better guys in-house. I mean, they were using Chris Cuthbert in the first round, who's amazing, and he's not being used by Canadian TV right now. Gordon Miller is a good broadcaster, and they were using him. And they're going with Kenny freaking Albert.
Didn't you compare Kenny Albert to, was it O-Town?
I did.
believe,
So
during the Wild
the actual
first-round
quote is
series?
people...
Or second
Well,
round
the
series?
second round series
Yes,
because
because Emmerich was getting the Emmy.
it was the
Right.
Granlund
Yes.
thing, and everybody was complaining about it.
God.
And I obviously said my piece about 8 times about that. But then for Game 3, because Mike Emmerich had to go off and get an Emmy
Because he's
he's the
awesome.
best freaking
Yeah.
broadcaster in the business,
How dare he?
and
Yeah.
Kenny Albert showed up, and there were a lot of people on Twitter saying, "Oh, good, they finally got rid of the guy who couldn't say Granlund
Oh, my
right."
God.
And so what I said
that's-
was,
that's
that's
such
like
a
seeing
hot
his tweets.
take.
I didn't see those.
my exact line was, "That's like showing up at a Rolling Stones concert, booing, walking out, going next door where you have O-Town tickets."
I had forgotten all about O-Town until you
Yeah.
tweeted that. Thank you
Yeah,
for
that's
reminding
right.
me about O-Town.
Everybody needs to
I
remember
could not
O-Town.
possibly name one of their songs. I just merely remember their existence,
No,
and
I
that's
can't
bad
either.
enough.
But yeah,
That's plenty bad enough.
they were awful.
Yes.
That's all anybody ever needs to know. And Kenny Albert is the O-Town of hockey broadcasting. I would rather hear Marv Albert,
That's why I said
who
it.
actually like Marv Albert, and also Marv Albert does have hockey in his past. He did call the Rangers Stanley Cup
He did.
Oh.
before, among many other things. But no, please no more Kenny Albert. Although we're stuck with at least 3 more games with Kenny Albert.
Also, I saw Kenny Albert at Tom Reed's this past year on an off day before. It was last
Before a
year.
rivalry night?
Before Rangers Wild game. And he
He does work for the Rangers.
He stands about 5 feet 5 inches tall.
Mm-hmm.
He is not
No,
tall at all. It's just like
He's frightening looking.
you're just
He really is scary looking. He doesn't
You're
look at all like his dad.
no. You're so stunned just seeing these guys on TV who you think, yeah, they're like 6 feet tall, just average height or whatever, and then he stands 5'5", and you're just like,
I just want to give
kind of
you
a troll in every sense.
a little bit of like. So I just want to kind of give you guys a little insight of how you can watch a broadcaster and critique them. If they say a number and then pause and then say a player's name, it's because they forgot that player's name. Which is you can pronounce them however you want, but do not forget the players' names. And I heard that 4 or 5 times today from Kenny Albert, and I was just thinking to myself, if he doesn't know who he's watching, if he doesn't have these internalized by now, he shouldn't be doing these games.
In fairness, it's game 1, but I agree.
No, that doesn't even work.
I know what you mean.
game
but
1 of the conference
if he's
finals.
still doing that in like game 4, then burn the guy at the stake.
I could probably do the Blackhawks and Ducks games
True.
without
Yeah.
researching
No,
knowing names and
you're
numbers.
right.
Obviously, I would want to do more research to give a better broadcast, but just memorizing names and numbers,
Yeah.
I can probably do that now.
That's
No, I know
probably
what you mean.
top of the list.
It is top of the list.
This
That's
is-
job 1 is to identify people.
This podcast has just become Charlie's
Yeah,
secret
sorry.
agenda to
That's
get
what Ryan's
Kenny Albert
here.
off the
Sorry.
call for the conference finals and get Chris Cuthbert in there.
Hold on a second.
If you have hate in your heart, let it out.
Also, side note, we've gotten to know the waitress here as we podcast. We had After-
This is going.
Yeah.
I
don't know where you're going.
Well, you'll get. I'm just side story is we had that weird thing with the jelly beans last week where we
Well-
tried those every flavor beans
Yeah.
after the
Oh
podcast.
God, don't do it.
Ben lucked out and got toothpaste.
Yeah,
Some of
Well,
us.
it was a progression.
Very
'Cause
fortunate.
I got rotten eggs,
Oh,
and then Giles got vomit, and then Ben got toothpaste. So
Yeah.
you eat the rotten eggs, and then you vomit, and then you brush your teeth.
Yeah. We had it all going.
I never
we
looked
had
at
the
it
whole,
like-
we had the whole
It's the
process.
cycle of life.
anyway, the story was that right before we started the podcast today, the waitress comes up to us and says, the table across the way here, they just all got up and decided to not pay their tab.
Yeah,
so
we had a
please,
dine dash.
for the love of God, don't be a jerk. Pay your tab.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
And this was just a family sitting here. Looked like they had like a graduation going
That
on
was
today.
the greatest con I've ever seen.
It's
It
always
was
the
2
innocent
little
ones.
old ladies.
Yeah.
It was a guy and then his daughter. Oh my God! This had, what was that movie from a couple years ago? Like We Are the Millers.
Yeah.
This had that written all over it.
Yeah.
Oh my! They're driving an RV down to Mexico to pick up
Jennifer
weed.
Aniston involved. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah. It was just a family. Whatever.
And I'm
Family
I'm a regular here at Grumpy's, so please, if I see you doing that, I will probably
hunt you down.
yeah. I'll cut your tires or
Giles the
something.
bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Giles the tab hunter. All right.
Anyway,
So,
since I'm not
what we learned tonight
threatening,
before we wrap this up, Chris Kreider is evil. Jared Spurgeon's going to get traded, so bust out your sad emojis and get used to using them now.
Charlie still hates
I don't
Kenny
like
Albert.
Kenny Albert. And pay your bills, people.